Hello, world. Welcome to the Breakout Finder podcast. I'm your host, Nate Liss. You can find me on Twitter at @AnOutrageJew. And with me, as always, is Mr. Ryan Lopes. You can find him on Twitter at StillRyan5. And tonight, fantastic guest that we have with us. So fantastic, oh my, that we all dressed up for the occasion.
Red carpet.
Mr. Pete Overzet. You can find him on Twitter at Pete Overzet. Pete, how's it going tonight? How are things?
Guys, it's good. I'll tell you what, go on a lot of these fantasy shows. It's real kind of lowest common denominator, real peasant bullshit, to be honest. So to finally be on a classy pod where the hosts understand the gravitas of the situation and what we are doing, that means a lot to me, because this isn't fantasy sports, guys. This is life and death, and I'm glad that we could actually dress for the podcast we want, not the podcast we have.
Well said, Pete. Well said. I actually ventured downstairs to the wine cellar. I grabbed some real vintage shit, boys. I don't know if you ever heard of this particular vineyard, Truly, I believe.
It's
so
French.
We're gonna go ahead.
Yeah.
It's French, I believe, and I'm gonna go ahead and we grabbed something. We're gonna go ahead and just pour just a nice something for tonight. Classy.
Cheers,
Classy
folks.
tonight, boys.
In the spirit of being classy, I also went down and got a black cherry of the same sort, and I'd like to join you, Ryan, in your choice
Nate,
of doing
now
this.
that was a better time than ever.
Would you guys mind if I just head to my wine cellar real quick? I'll be right back.
Yeah, have at it.
Please do that.
He has a fucking wine cellar?
Dude, I told you, we invited Pete Overzet. Came through with the Blazers. We're all drinking expensive vintage shit here.
When you live in a place
So
like
I
this,
normally wouldn't bust this one out on just any
It's a special night, Pete.
Tuesday. So this is actually a 1983 vintage grapefruit.
Huh.
And again, I said I was saving this for a very special evening, and I think that evening just came, guys.
that is
Cheers, boys.
rare. That's rare. I've only seen those on eBay. That's rare.
It's nice.
These are
Now-
the perfect conditions for this.
Yeah, this is we have a high class show laid out tonight, and Pete, obviously we're all dressed to the nines. We're drinking some of the most private stock stuff that people like us can honestly afford. This podcast, as many know, very, very serious, very highbrow. We get right into things here. So, boys, if I may,
Yes.
let's talk about another highbrow, someone that's classy. He's back on the scene. Okay, Hunter Henry, timeline legend. Adam Levitan came out after Hunter Henry's performance. 41 to 62 snaps, 30 slot or wide. Ran a route on 37 of Phillip Rivers' 46 dropbacks. Dropped an 8-102 line. Pete, it's classy shit, man. What do we got about Hunter Henry?
Dude, this guy is so classy. He gets out of bed and scores more points in one game that O.J. Howard's had all season combined. That's what this man does. I mean, it's effortless for him. He looks like he should be a cast member on Downton Abbey, and then he's out here putting up 8-102 tutties. I am terrified, though, because he's only 4,000 this week on DraftKings, and he's going to be 95% owned, and I'm going to have to hate him for that fact.
Nate, are you obviously this offseason we waded through the rankings and the waters, so to speak, as you aerate your vintage over there. The concern with Hunter Henry was the injury history, right? And that obviously bit him a little bit to start the season. So any feelings, any kind of confidence towards Henry going forward, Nate, whether it's season long or that dynasty outlook as well?
No, I don't have a Hunter Henry concern whatsoever. I mean, he came back and he played more snaps than we expected, had a much better game than we expected. If you had him in Dynasty, you weren't selling him, you were sitting on him, you were waiting. Hunter Henry vaulted himself back into the conversation of one of the top tight ends in Dynasty. This was the perfect game for him to bounce back. 8-102. We're not going to get that every week, especially when Keenan Allen's only seeing 6 targets, because Keenan Allen is clearly going to see more than that in the future. Obviously, even with Mike Williams seeing his 10, that seems much higher than we're going to see in the future. So I expect a little bit less than that from Hunter Henry, but it's nice to see the target share was back up. So I love Hunter Henry.
Yeah, hell of a debut. We're gonna talk a little Chargers, little more Chargers later on as well. But let's talk about another tight end here. Someone else that us fancy folk might consider fancy as well. Austin Hooper, who's out here stunting, leading all tight ends in PPR scoring at the moment. That's better than Travis Kelce. It's better than Zach Ertz. It's better than George Kittle. That group of big three. Hoop, man. Pete, did you have a bunch of Hoop? Were you a Hoop believer just to start the season?
You know what? I had him in one dynasty league, and like a fish, I traded him away before the season started. So I am feeling a little burned. And then on top of that, and I apologize if I keep funneling my takes through a DFS angle, but I didn't play him last week when he was mega chalk and popped off. So you guys are catching me at the wrong time to say nice things about Austin Hooper, who can flat out go to hell as far as I'm concerned. But geez, no, yeah. I saw he's on pace for 112 catches, 1,280 yards and 8 touchdowns. I mean, just like put me in the coffin.
Yeah, the concern with Hooper coming into the season was like, there's no way that his role's gonna grow with Calvin Ridley expected to kind of take a jump forward. Obviously, they got Julio Jones still, but what he's doing this season, literally, on top of the group, essentially here. So, Nate, were you a Hooper owner to start the season? Do you want to try to acquire him going forward?
Sad days, Ryan, Pete. Sad days, because I have a similar tale to tell as Pete does. I sold him preseason in a deal thinking that I'd finish close to the top 10. I had no idea that he would be number 1 overall in fantasy points per game in 2019. And for that, I am sad. Hunter Henry's been fantastic. What do you say about him? Number 1 in target separation. He's exceeded expectations, and for that I am sad that I sold him. For those of you that still own him, ride the wave. He's young. He's top 3 in the league right now, and it's only going to get better. Especially doing all this on less than 20% target share. It's impressive.
Here's to the tight ends we'll never remember, and the friends we'll never forget. Cheers, guys.
Pete, well said. Well said. Eloquent as always, Peter. Eloquent. Listen, man, the tight end pool is, again, we talk about the big three. How that you had to, if you were going to draft one of these guys earlier, you're looking at the Kittle, the Ertz, Kelce, obviously. But the fact of the matter is, this season we had guys like Will Dissly showing out, obviously, before he got unfortunately sidelined here. So I guess the fact of the matter is, tight end, you want to just keep focusing on him late. If we're going to dial things in from a season long lens here, let's switch it up a little bit. Going to bounce to wide receiver. I want to talk a little bit about Courtland Sutton, who's quietly having a hell of a season and kind of doesn't get talked about as far as these second year players are concerned. I'm curious to get Nate's thoughts down the road here about kind of his stock and where you want to target him and kind of try to buy him. But he's just outside of the top 10 right now in PPR points as far as wide receivers are concerned. He's 12 overall. Pete, are you despite the Joe Flacco presence, are you a Courtland Sutton guy?
Yeah, I love Courtland Sutton. My buddy Pat Carane, who I manage a couple high-stakes teams with, we drafted him on both of our high-stakes teams this year. We got him, I believe, in the 8th round in one, in the 9th round in the other. And for me and him, there was just this clear tier break for wide receivers that had the chance to break out after him. And you kept hearing this thing, oh, wide receiver so deep this, and we were constantly like, is it that deep, the guys that can actually break out? And we were, doing cartwheels when we were getting Courtland Sutton as our wide receiver 5 and 6, and people are, why are you so excited about him? But this is the reason why, because he had the profile of someone who could break out like this. I mean, he was top 7 in air yards, I know, going into Sunday night. So he's getting both a ton of targets and, high leverage targets down the field. I mean, this was his first kind of dud game, and it was still 4 for 76. So he's entering that must-start territory. I think he's a top 24 wide receiver going forward. Has to be in your lineup every week. I mean, he's smashing it, and I feel like it's still slightly under the radar.
Yeah, for sure. He had a pretty interesting, kind of draft process. I know there was a lot of maybe overanalyzation with him. People thinking, is he really going to have that kind of impact? And now, obviously, saddled up with Joe Flacco. So you have to. What he's doing now is just that much more impressive to me, given the quarterback under center. Nate, is Sutton someone that you're trying to go out and actively try to acquire as far as your dynasty teams are concerned? Oh, hold on. You must have him everywhere already, huh?
This is a ridiculous question. Of
you
course.
might need another sip before you answer this one.
I gotta pontificate.
Fantastic word. It's a very rich word.
Let me tell you, boys. First off, he hasn't seen less than 7 targets in a game all year, and he has exceeded expectation. Because many people coming out of the draft into last year believed that he came from a small school and he wasn't going to produce in year 1, and it may take a little longer. Well, we're seeing it. It's a year 2 breakout for Courtland Sutton. And that sometimes is the expectation from a player that may have come from the American Conference, especially when we break down some of this college tape on these players. But he has gone far and away and exceeded all expectation in Denver, especially with Joe Flacco, somebody that we thought would completely throttle him. I'm with Pete. He's top 24 all year. He's 24 years old. In Dynasty, we talked about this on the Sonic Truth podcast. Guys like Courtland Sutton, guys like Galladay, some of these other names, DJ Chark, you need to buy high. Just push the chips in, pay the requisite amount, get these guys on your roster, lick your wounds, because they're going to be the dominant alpha receivers for the foreseeable future. And especially when the Joe Flacco era is over and we move into the Drew Lock or whatever it becomes, Courtland Sutton is going to be that alpha wide receiver going forward, and there's just no question about it.
So from an ascending talent in Courtland Sutton, I want to talk about one of my favorite players, some player that I was on the show last week, kind of licking my wounds, and he was a player that's kind of torpedoed a lot of teams so far. But last week, boys, was when you just sit back and you just have a sip and you just enjoy Stefon Diggs, 3 tutties, flexing all afternoon. Pete, it was a glorious afternoon for those of us that held stood pat and are now just reaping the rewards. Are you a Diggs believer going forward for the rest of the season, or is that kind of the one spike and he's going to kind of go back to irrelevance? Yeah,
so I have 10 total season-long teams across high stakes, dynasty, redraft, home leagues, all that good stuff. I went 10-0 last week because I have 75% Diggs. So it's either 7 or 8 teams that I have him on. So yeah, this was an awesome week after a few hard weeks there. This is ostensibly a dynasty show, right?
We kind of like to toe the line between some season long advice, some dyno advice. Talking about Nate's
we don't like to put
sunglasses
on
normally.
things.
So it's whatever the hell we want to do over here, bro.
I don't want to put baby in a corner. No, but I was going to tell you guys a dynasty trade that I pulled off for Stefon Diggs 2 weeks ago. So this is, of course, when we were in the dark days of Stefon Diggs, of course, and we were in the heyday, the salad days of Darren Waller. I traded Darren Waller, Preston Williams, in a 2020 second for Stefon Diggs. Come to Papa.
Call that a return on investment. That is unbelievable.
So that one felt good to get him on the squad there. So yeah, I've been a believer. Last week was awesome. Now the question is, does Mike Zimmer, does he take off, the 8 tiers of monocles over his eyes that are fogging him up and thinking all he can do is run the ball? And does he finally air it out to Thielen and Diggs going forward?
Yeah, Thielen had like the week prior. He was a squeaky wheel that obviously got the grease. Diggs definitely got his last week. And the hope, for us Diggs fans alike here that they continue to air it out. Nate, I know you are a fellow Diggs fan. Is there concern going forward? Are you ready to just ride the wave, whatever that wave may be?
Ryan, once upon a time on this show, I referred to Kirk Cousins as hot dog shit. My thoughts haven't changed that much. They haven't wavered much on Kirk Cousins. I love Stefon Diggs, though. I made a deal last year where I moved Amari Cooper for him because I loved him so much. Unfortunately, he's been completely throttled a majority of the year by a team that decided to be run first, or a team that's gone to Adam Thielen more frequently than they've gone to Stefon Diggs. Diggs last year was the number 11 fantasy points per game at the wide receiver position. Currently, he's sitting at 27. A lot of that has to do with the game that we just witnessed. But you have to be a fan of a player that always gets open, that has the skill set that he has. Currently, yards per pass route, he's number 2, 3.42 yards. So I'm an absolute fan. I don't think there's anybody out there that's not a fan of Diggs, but he was a perfect example of a player that you should have bought low on. You knew what his skill set was. You knew eventually this was going to subside and we were going to see the real talent. That game last week was an outlier. Diggs is not going to do that every week, but Diggs could absolutely be an 8 catches for 105 week in and week out. I mean, he has that kind of upside. So if you bought him, kudos to you. Peter Overzet over there. What a buy. What a savvy move.
Could you guys mind if I just take a quick bow?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Listen, Pete, you may or may not know, we, Nate and I recently-ish, started up our own little corner over there at patreon.com/breakoutfinder, in which we dole out dynasty, fantasy-related advice season long, dabble in some college Devy prospect talk. We'll even, teach you how to spruce up your wardrobe, whatever it might be. And what we've been doing is trying to pull out a couple of these good Patreon questions for all of our devoted listeners here, man. So we, put up the Pete Overzet, bat signal of sorts. Everyone got fired up, and I think Nate and I pulled out one or two of our favorite questions for you. So I'm going to read you one here, and then Nate, if you have a second one, man, fire it out there as well.
I do.
Okay, beautiful. So the first one here, Peter, for you, from our guy Joe over at the Patreon. Rest of season question, so it's a season-long focused one here for you. Ronald Jones or Royce Freeman?
So this one hits close to home because, again, my buddy Pat Corain, who we co-manage the high-stakes teams with, he is literally the world's biggest truther. Maybe him and Ben Gretsch go back and forth about who loves Ronald Jones more. And so, yeah, have kept very close tabs on Ronald Jones. And he's going to be very upset to hear me say that I definitely prefer Royce Freeman rest of season. I mean, it's kind of simple, right? Because Ronald Jones is getting a touch squeeze from Peyton Barber, and he's getting a pass-catching squeeze from Dare Ngubawale. And Royce Freeman he's in a direct 50-50 split with Phillip Lindsay, but this is a good kind of 50-50 split because they're both getting targets and they're both getting carries. I mean, he had 5 for 42 last week receiving, which just gives him an insane floor. I think they're similar talents from like a prospect profile standpoint. You guys could probably speak to that better than I can. But I think Freeman not only has flex value right now, but also is the premier handcuff. I mean, if Lindsay goes down, Royce Freeman's a top 10 back rest of season. So you have to take that because even if an injury happens to Barber or Ronald Jones, yeah, his workload increases, but it's still not the like runaway RB1 status we want. So definitely give me Freeman there.
I like that. We had our guy Russell J. Clay on last week, who, much like Corain with his Ronald Jones fandom, Russell Clay might be the premier Royce Freeman truther. Okay. So we talked to Royce a little bit last week, and getting to see the way that he's been used, and again his receiving ability last week, and him coming out of school, the box scores that he compiled, his athletic profile. I know our guy Rusty kind of compared him to a Le'Veon Bell type of player, just to give you an idea of kind of where his mind was at as far as ceiling was concerned. So Phillip Lindsay, no one kind of expected him to do what he's doing, but Royce is in a pretty nice spot, all things considered. So I'm definitely with you, Pete. Nate, if you want to speak on the Royce situation at all, if not, hit him with that question too.
I mean, I feel like Pete said it so eloquently. I mean, he delivered a poignant response, and I have nothing to add. We did get another Patreon question. Again, as Ryan said, if you want to hear your questions read on our show, patreon.com/breakoutfinder. This one's a bit different. This is a departure from your typical football-related question, Pete. This one is a little more personal, and they're reaching out to you.
This didn't show up on the show sheet, so you guys are gonna catch my raw reaction right here.
Yeah. This is this one is raw. This obviously came from somebody that's dealing with things, and they wanted something out of you personally. They almost a therapeutic response. So I'm gonna go ahead and read this. Recently, I've been experiencing abnormally high levels of T, and for some reason also identifying as a lion. Any advice? Signed, Anonymous. Signed by Anonymous.
The funny thing is I feel like that question is the equivalent of someone saying, I recently came into a lot of money and lots of women are interested in me. What do you have to say? Signed, Anonymous. I guess I'm failing to see the issue or the problem that this good patron is dealing with here. It sounds like everything you would want. High T, feeling like a lion, making alpha moves every day on the waiver wire. I mean, what is wrong here? You don't need me, dude. You've reached the pinnacle.
What is again, we're gonna throw a little more off show sheet here. Describe being a lion in the fantasy world right now, Pete. For those that might be uninitiated, unfamiliar, they might have low T as well. If you are a lion, how, describe that in a fantasy sense.
So being a lion in the fantasy sense, it's not just copy and pasting last week's rankings. It's watching the game, seeing who wows you, okay? This is how we determine who is good at fantasy football. It's not being afraid to say, hey, Alvin Kamara sucked this week, okay? It's not being afraid to be like, Patrick Mahomes sucked this week. Sometimes the words that are available to us, we don't need a thesaurus to pull it out and describe in nuance how these players failed. A lion just says, you sucked, okay? We move on. All right, a lion has the conviction to put David Montgomery at his RB1 and not waver on it, not for 1 second. A lion will go to Matt Nagy's house and threaten him with physical violence unless he starts playing David Montgomery because he has 2,000 Instagram comments calling for his head. That is what a lion is, Mr. Anonymous.
Bro, you guys can't see. I have a couple tiers. That's what I strive to be. That's what we all should strive to be as fantasy football owners here. So listen, to all you Lions out there, keep touting David Montgomery, I guess. I mean, keep saddling up, boys.
That Pete and I, we share a predilection for our definition of the word lion. Kudos to you. So that was fantastic.
Well done. Well done. Listen, Pete. So speaking of lion and lion type plays, it might have been three or 4 weeks ago at this point, man. You sat in that same spot you are now on the Swolecast, which many watch and enjoy, and I believe you might have called the Brandin Cooks game, if I remember correctly. But I don't think it might have been week 2 or week 3 or something like that. Or you were all in on Brandin Cooks at some point. Things haven't. Much like Stefon Diggs up to last week, Cook's kind of dealing with a little bit of, I think he was in concussion protocol. The question that I have for you, assuming that he's, trending in the right direction health-wise, are we going to get that Brandin Cooks breakout game? Is Brandin Cooks a player you are actively, ready, willing, and able to play at any given point? Or, what kind of matchup are you looking for?
Yeah, I think from a dynasty perspective, I do think he's still probably a decent buy if you can get him for cheap. But as far as what's happening this season and on a week-to-week thing, I think it was our buddy Sean Siegel earlier this season did a breakdown of the heat map of where Jared Goff is throwing. And what got us so excited about this Rams offense in years past was them stretching the field, this vertical offense, and that is gone. I mean, it is gone. He is throwing 10 yards in front of the line of scrimmage to Cooper Kupp, Gerald Everett, and occasionally Robert Woods. And the whole vertical element of this offense is just gone. And I don't know if Sean McVay lost faith in him, if he's whispering the sweet nothings into Jared Goff's ears and he's just saying, no, leave me alone. I just want to throw up 5 yards. But as of right now, Brandin Cooks is not a safe start. He never is going to be a safe start until something changes. It used to be in like DFS, right? It'd be like these 3 receivers, whichever one was going to be the lowest owned, you just played him because they had just as good a shot at popping off. And I don't think that's the case anymore.
Nate, we've had some pretty passionate discussions about whether it was Kirk Cousins being, as you so eloquently put it, dog shit. We've had past discussions about the San Francisco signal caller, Jimmy G. We're not quite sure if Jimmy G is good. The next question that I have, and I'm going to go over to you first, Nate.
No, Ryan.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
We're sure he's not good.
Okay, we're sure Jimmy G is not good. Just to completely clarify that, I'm going to kick this over to you first, Nate, and then we'll get our guy Pete's take as well. Is Jared Goff? Does he belong in that same category? I'm leaning towards. I don't think Jared Goff, boys. Jared Goff is not a good quarterback. Nate, any strong convictions, bud?
Jared Goff might barely be replacement level at this point. I had him in a higher stakes fantasy league because last year I believe he finished as the quarterback 10. I think in 2018 I figured, hey, that Sean McVay offense, it's creative, it's got weapons. They returned Cooper Kupp this year. The Todd Gurley injury has obviously shaken some things up. But Jared Goff has been awful. Jared Goff has been absolutely terrible, and this is an uninspired offense. I mean, Cooper Kupp is a talent. I mean, he is a talent. Despite Matt Kelly doing his best to absolutely cripple his fantasy value and the name of his family and the crest for which he defends, that did not work. And Cooper Kupp rose to the challenge and has been a successful NFL player. Brandin Cooks, though, as the third banana in this offense, has fallen to the wayside. He's number 42 currently in fantasy points per game. He's 37 in receptions at the wide receiver position. He's an absolute buy low because his talent is there. He is a great player. We all know that. But his role currently in this offense, as Pete alluded to, he's just not being used to the best of his abilities. Cooper Kupp's going to do the underneath routes. They're going to continue using Todd Gurley a little bit in the pass game. Robert Woods is going to suck up targets. Suddenly, Gerald Everett is a viable fantasy option. And where is Brandin Cooks in this situation? If I could get him for cheap from a dynasty-centric standpoint, I'd like him. But in terms of season long, boy, he's better suited in best ball at this point.
So a couple hours before we went on air here, the Rams actually pushed their chips in. They actually acquired Jalen Ramsey, and my initial reaction was, I'm a big Jalen guy. Obviously, they paid a pretty hefty price, but my initial reaction was, be nice if they actually had a quarterback now. And as Pete kind of alluded to, the ongoing joke of sorts has been, obviously, Goff's at the line making the throws, but what's going on inside the helmet is, McVay's running the show. So anything you want to add to us just piling on top of Goff here? Pete, I know obviously you said you're kind of skittish to play a guy like Brandin Cooks despite the talent, knowing that what we kind of have in Jared Goff right now. Anything else you want to add before we move on?
Yeah, no, I was cooking up a nice, succinct kind of soundbite while you guys were going, and this is what I came up with, guys. Jared Goff is a system quarterback, and the system is broken.
This is why he gets paid the big bucks, Nate.
No, I could see that. That was. I don't know what to say. I have no response.
There's nothing more to say. There's nothing more to add to that. Jared Goff, we've kind of flipped through all the pages, and the listeners can do with that what they will. Changing gears here a little bit. Kind of in that Royce Freeman role to a bit of a lesser extent, but I want to talk about Chase Edmunds, a running back that the Cardinals spent a 4th-round pick on, so a little bit of draft capital there. Pete talked about premier elite handcuffs. Chase Edmunds certainly, to me, looks like he checks that box, backing up someone like a David Johnson. And over at PlayerProfiler.com, nothing spectacular as far as metrics or spark score, but a pretty notable 96th percentile agility score. So tell us the story about Chase Edmunds. Was he a player? He was kind of one of those hot, buzzworthy names in this offseason, Pete, a player that a lot of these, fantasy analysts weren't leaving the drafts without. Were you one of those guys?
He ended up getting a little too pricey for me in redrafts as far as where the handcuffs were going. He had creeped up, I would say, by the time drafts were going. He was going, at least in the high stakes leagues, in the 9th and 10th round, which was a little pricey because as much as we like him as a premier handcuff, I don't think any of us thought he was going to have standalone flex value as long as David Johnson was healthy. And that's kind of exactly what we've seen. And it's almost kind of a mind fuck, if you will, in that every time he touches the ball, he looks so good. He looks so explosive. I mean, if someone wants to try to argue that he's not a better runner than David Johnson right now, I have a condo timeshare that I'd like to sell you. But the thing is, when he has the ball, he looks great. So I do think he's still just in that timeshare thing. Even last week when he produced, he only had 7 touches in a pace-up shootout spot. 7 touches. And yeah, he was very efficient, scored that touchdown, but that isn't sustainable. So for now, if someone wants to buy him as a flex option, I think you move him. But if you have realistic expectations about him just being a premier handcuff, then you're sitting good.
Yeah, Nate, I'm thinking like somewhere along the lines of like, satellite back plus, you can everyone will value that differently. As far as season long leagues go, I imagine the ship has sailed as far as, waiver wire claims go. I imagine he's been scooped up for a couple weeks now, certainly after last week's performance. So if he's out there, definitely gotta consider him, but I doubt that's the case in many of these leagues. Anything else you want to add as far as Chase Edmonds, as far as season-long stock, Nate, or his dynasty outlook?
Look, nobody hated on Chase Edmonds harder than I hated on Chase Edmonds. There's few people that can say that they went to the top of that hill and were willing to die on it. I'm not willing to die on it anymore. I've come down a little bit. I've walked about halfway back down the hill. My flag is planted about mid of the hill now. The agility score is really the difference for me. A lot of these running backs that have been successful in the NFL that didn't have feature athleticism had good enough agility or had great agility. That's the case with him, 96th percentile, as Ryan had mentioned earlier. But he's just not a feature-sized running back. In the event that David Johnson goes down, if he can sustain the production that he has shown in limited opportunity, then for sure he has RB1 upside in this offense. The question is, will he be able to sustain it if that happens? And is David Johnson gonna even sustain an injury? I mean, I feel like you can't even really play Chase Edmonds because Pete even mentioned it. Even in an offense that's running as many plays as they are, or they claim to want to, he's not seeing that much opportunity. So he's got a 23% opportunity share. So David Johnson's clearly the alpha in this offense. We all know that David Johnson's one of the top backs in the league, but he's worth the cuff in the event of an injury. And for that sake, I like him, but I still don't know where the fuck Fordham College is.
I know Nate's analysis is sincere because he called the handcuff a cuff. That's how I know he's completely speaking business here. Pete, let's talk about a couple more running backs here, and perhaps more of a dire situation, if you will. Austin Ekeler, I know for me, helped me coast to a couple 5-0 starts to kind of start the season. Obviously, Melvin Gordon back in the fold, and our pal Evan Silver, the other half of Established to Run, tweeted out, since ending his holdout, 15 of Chargers running back Melvin Gordon's 20 carries have gained 3 yards or less. 8 of his 11 targets have gained 3 yards or less. All told, plays intended for Melvin Gordon have averaged 2.77 yards. So all those numbers, boys, we're all numbers guys here. You can tell by the way we're dressed. We're big numbers guys. That doesn't sound good to me. So my fear, all of our fears, if you have a team that was helped by Austin Ekeler here, Pete, this whole Gordon Ekeler timeshare coexistence, they're going to just cancel each other out. This is going to be beneficial to absolutely nobody.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the numbers, so I'm actually going to I'll go the narrative route here. I was just thinking, isn't this situation the perfect embodiment, the perfect microcosm of where the NFL was and where it's going relative to the running back position? You have the early round running back and Melvin Gordon taken in the first round, holding out, demanding more money. He comes back. They're just shoving it into his chest. He's running 2 yards up the middle and getting tackled. Then you have the unheralded running back, scat back with insane agility, pass catching upside, big playability, completely dominating. They're funneling the offense through him when he's gone. And now they're both almost canceling each other out, what each other's strengths even are. And we just have this huge mess. And it's like, this is the situation. Austin Ekeler is where this league is going. Austin Ekeler can be a poor man's Christian McCaffrey, which is like the nicest thing you can say about a running back. What is Melvin Gordon? Melvin Gordon's like a slightly better Malcolm Brown. I mean, I don't know. Like what are we even dealing with here? Just be done with Gordon and let's get the Ekeler show on the road.
Oh my.
But before we kick it over to Nate, because I imagine he's got to add something on top of that, Pete. I'm completely with you. I'm curious, buddy. Did you and Pat stumble onto any sort of Melvin Gordon ownership during your FFPC drafts?
No, there's always just a couple teams that just love that name brand value. It's the same thing. We weren't touching Antonio Brown when that stuff was going on, but someone's like, whoa, I can get Antonio Brown in the third, or whoa, I can get Melvin Gordon in the sixth. And it's like, no, we're going to draft Christian Kirk and move on. You know, it's just not even a consideration. I know we talked to Evan Silva on Ship Chasing Podcast this week, and he had gotten them in the 8th round in their draft, and they had taken Ekeler, I believe, in the 5th. So the 8th round actually seems about the sweet spot where you're like, all right, this is worth a flyer, where the opportunity cost isn't too bad. But no, I don't have much Melvin this year.
Yeah, no, and you're obviously for those that I stumbled into a couple of Melvin Gordon teams kind of in that 6th, 7th round range. Nothing in the 8th that I would feel a little bit better about. But yeah, it's looking kind of muddy. Nate, is there any clarity on the horizon here? Is this going to just be a complete mess going forward in Los Angeles?
I think it's going to be a complete mess going forward. I mean, what do you do? The Los Angeles Rams are 3-3. They know Austin Ekeler has plenty of talent. They know that he can do everything that this offense needs, especially knowing that teams are playing defense, knowing that Jared Goff's not pushing the ball down the field, right? So they're crowding that line of scrimmage. Melvin Gordon's not going anywhere. He took a bunch of weeks off. We don't know how his athleticism or how his conditioning was coming in, back into playing shape. Austin Ekeler seems like the favorite to kind of cycle back to a little more opportunity, and we're seeing it now. Who knows what the allegiance to Melvin Gordon is here in Los Angeles? There's nothing. There's no guarantee that he signs some monster contract there. We talked about this with Russell Clay. There's a chance he ends up somewhere completely different, and it could be worse. We could see, just like he said, he ends up with a team like the Jets. I mean, obviously not the Jets with Le'Veon Bell being there, but a situation that just cripples his value. In Dynasty, I think you're holding all the way out to free agency, trying to figure this situation out. But there's absolutely no reason to believe that Eckler's going anywhere. And I think they're absolutely going to just cannibalize each other, at least till the end of the season.
So Melvin Gordon was kind of potentially looking like a free square, especially if you got him in the 8th round. But for the most part, if you're drafting him in that 5, 6, 7 round range, you're not going to see that return on investment that you were hoping for. At least doesn't look like that upon early sample sizes with his return here. Another player, Pete, that I want to talk about that was going high for good reason. You mentioned Sean Siegel, a player that he was super, super high on. Juju Smith-Schuster, obviously going in that first round, late first round, early second, whatever it was. You were pushing your chips in for Juju. Ben goes down. Then Mason Rudolph goes down. They were playing some quarterback out of Stanford or Samford or some Sam school last week. What's the story with Juju going forward in season long? This is a ship that has completely sunk.
So this is me taking this fine beverage and pouring one out for Juju Smith-Schuster.
Oh, that's it, boys. I'm gonna open up number 2 myself and just take a sip out of sadness.
This is a metaphor for every last drip of his fantasy value going into the no fluff mug. Because he died, guys. Juju Smith-Schuster is dead.
He's gone.
It was really fun. I enjoyed taking him in the first round. I have no regrets. I TTP, trust the process. He was set up for a smash year, but I mean, he had 4 targets this week with Devin Hodges. 2 weeks ago, he had 4 targets. His only 2 big games have been big yards after the catch plays for touchdowns, and that we know isn't sustainable. We've been benching him in our leagues for Curtis Samuel every week. I mean, he's just on the bench. The FFWC we play in, you start 5 wide receivers. We are benching Juju Smith-Schuster back-to-back weeks. Our first-round pick, we don't care. We're starting Courtland Sutton, baby. Who cares?
Let's go.
But, yeah, you can't start him unless you're in a league where you're starting 7 wide receivers or like Albert Wilson is your wide receiver 3. I just don't know how you can trust him right now.
So I'm going to throw out one more scenario to you, Pete, before I kick it over to Nate to get his kind of thoughts on the situation. In one of my season-long leagues, I completely just floated out an offer. I am a Juju owner that, again, poured one out myself. I was looking to offer him up for a John Smokey Brown and a Chris Herndon package. Asking probably a little bit too much, but that owner completely laughed at me, which, again, if we were going to sit here X amount of weeks ago and talk about that wouldn't even be a thought in your mind. So is there a player that, I mean, right now you're not getting anything for Juju, but is there a player that you would feel comfortable kind of floating him out there for, Pete?
Man, I'm trying to think for redraft purposes. I mean, again, this isn't helpful, but he would have been like a Robby Anderson before this week type of guy. So I don't know. Maybe you guys can help me with another. But I did have a thought too. Like, we're talking about redraft purposes, but when we say the things that, okay, we love this guy's talent and we believe that long term he's going to be successful. It's almost like when they say in stock trading, you contra trade your emotions. When you want to sell, you buy. When you want to buy, you sell. Right now, we want to throw Juju down the drain, which means it's probably a pretty damn good time to buy him in Dynasty.
I like it. Nate, that's probably a perfect segue for you, man.
Yeah, and listen, if you happen to stumble your way over to the Breakout Finder Patreon account, you may or may not see my Dynasty Buys article this week that may or may not have a buy on somebody that is not Juju Smith-Schuster, that is in the Pittsburgh offense, that is not named James fucking Washington. What I would like to say, though, is since Mason Rudolph has been playing quarterback full-time, we're going to exclude week 2 when he played a partial amount of the game and Big Ben played the other part. Deontay Johnson has more or less dominated every facet of this offense. Targets, receptions. He has 38% of the air yards over that time. Obviously, he has the target share over that time. He has the ADOT over that time, clearly. And is the future Mason Rudolph? If it is, Juju Smith-Schuster, we believe that he had the traits that would translate to being a wide receiver 1 despite having an elite wide receiver in Antonio Brown on the other side. Clearly, that's not the case because since Antonio Brown has left, Juju Smith-Schuster has been relegated to the wide receiver number 33 overall. He was wide receiver 8 to finish the year last year, so he has crestfallen, and I don't know where the tumble stops. In Dynasty, obviously you're holding him because the amount of value that you have so far lost on Juju Smith-Schuster is incredible, and much like stock trading, until you sell, you have not lost. So with Juju Smith, you've got to hold him unless there's somebody out there that's willing to give you a reasonable offer in the same mentality that he's going to bounce back. But Deontay Johnson has been sneaky good, a player that a lot of us weren't talking about pre-draft, goes in the 3rd round to Pittsburgh, a team that we have to give a lot of credit to over the years for selecting good wide receiver talent. Prior to Juju Smith, clear as a bust. But Deontay Johnson looks fantastic. I believe he's number 1 overall in target separation per route run right now. And if you go back and watch him, he's open all over the place. It's very impressive. So I always, similar to Stefon Diggs, you want these guys that get open. There's obviously going to be some advancement that needs to take place with this offense, especially with Mason Rudolph, a young quarterback. Big Ben will come back. If you're looking to sell Juju Smith, maybe that's your opportunity is when they link back up if you don't have the confidence in him. But I'm buying Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, Deontay Johnson was like the classic, film versus metrics, debate towards the end of the draft season. Kind of a late riser last year, and those that watched the film saw someone like Nate said that could separate with ease, really, really fluid route runner, but didn't do anything as far as athleticism or testing or something like that. sticking with wide receivers, Pete mentioned Robby Anderson briefly, and he's the next player I kind of want to talk about here. That buy low window appears to be all but shut. Scott Barrett wrote up Le'Veon Bell a week or so ago. Robby Anderson, with Darnold's return, was another one of those screaming values, screaming buy lows. Showed out on Sunday, 125-1, did what Robby does, beat a corner deep. Pete, I want to talk a little bit about the Jets' schedule in general as it relates to Robby Anderson, Le'Veon Bell. I talked about Chris Herndon, who I was trying to kind of sneak my way into, given kind of maybe the injury concern or something like that. But the Jets, to close the year, they still get Miami twice. They get the Giants once. They get the Bengals. They get Oakland sprinkled in there, Pittsburgh as well. So a really kind of cake schedule in as it relates to other teams like that. So are you a fan of some of these Jets pieces coming together with Sammy's return?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think we already have a proxy for how this shakes out. This is basically the same tale that happened to Robby Anderson last year. I pulled up his box score because that's what Lions do. We pull up box scores. 2018, in his first 7 games, he only had 1 game with over 5 targets, okay? He only had 2 games where he scored touchdowns. Slow start. After that, he only had 1 game where he had less than 7 targets. He went on an absolute tear, culminating in the fantasy playoffs, 11 for 96 and a touchdown, or 7 for 96 and a touchdown, 9 for 140 and a touchdown. We know what Robby Anderson can do. We know that Sam Darnold can get him the ball deep down the field. And you mentioned it, the schedule over the next 5 weeks, weeks 7 through 12 is just so juicy. They're going to be playing behind against New England. Then they get Miami, and then they have these cupcake matchups. Jacksonville in there without Ramsey, who just got traded. Then they get Giants, Redskins, Raiders. I mean, Robby Anderson's about to pop off here.
Yeah. He's going to eat. Nate, I mean, this is, again, the window, as I assume, has closed. But anything you want to add as far as Crowder, maybe Crowder, Anderson, Herndon, whatever it may be?
I mean, just to define how I feel about Robby Anderson, I was typing his name into Player Profiler's player search, and I typed Robby fucking Anderson, and he did not come up. But I'm a huge fan of Robby Anderson's upside. I mean, it's rare when we get an undrafted free agent that ascends to the level that Robby Anderson has ascended to, especially coming out of Temple, a school that hasn't put a lot of elite talent in the league. He's just constantly open, and this is a guy that's constantly up there at the top in air yards and ADOT. Getting Sam Darnold back, a player that a lot of us believe would take a major step forward this year. Of course, he ends up with mono amongst whatever other problems he had and misses some time. The buy window on Robby Anderson has shut, especially considering there is really no other option in this passing game. I'm not a fan of Jamison Crowder. I mean, he's fine. He's probably startable in a lot of leagues if it's deep, or if you need target share, I guess Robby or Jamison Crowder. I don't love him. It's not a sexy name. It doesn't make me want to take my shirt off and rub my body with oil, baby oil, the same way that Robby Anderson does. I mean, the guy is just a true talent. But Robby Anderson coming back, having the game that he had, absolutely closed the buy window. I think there's going to be some ups and downs in the future. I mean, Pete mentioned a lot of good opportunities coming up. But Robby Anderson's another one of these guys that, different from some of the bigger names, when they have a couple of down games, it's really down for them. And there's an opportunity to buy. When Juju Smith is having down games, his value is still, his floor is still so high because of that name cachet. So if you want to buy Robby Anderson, you're going to have to wait for another down game. You're clearly not buying now. He bounced back, but this is a guy everybody should be trying to get a hold of.
Yeah, I figured myself as a pretty big Robby Anderson fan, and I'm not sure I'm Robby Anderson rub my body with oil fan, but I think I can get there. I want to see him with Sammy, kind of solidified under center. We got a handful of questions here. I'm going to shave a couple of these off, boys, so we can get kind of the real poignant ones. And one of those that I want to talk to our guy Pete about is Kyler Murray and what's been going on with Kyler Murray's fantasy season so far. So I pulled up a couple interesting little nuggets here. Kyler Murray threw last week 340 yards, 3 scores. In doing so, he became the 3rd rookie in NFL history to have a 300 pass yard game in 3 of his the team's first 6 games. The other 2 were Cam Newton and Andrew Luck. So pretty impressive company for those that like to kind of dig for those little stats and nuggets or whatever like that. Pete, so Kyler and that Arizona offense, we talked a little bit about Arizona already. They were one of the sexy kind of fantasy names coming into the season. It was a little rocky for Kyler to start, but he's kind of really coming into his own these past couple games. Did you stumble into any kind of Kyler-led teams this year? Or were you unfortunately missing the boat with Kyler as I found myself doing all too often?
No, Kyler is another one of those guys. In all 3 of my high-stakes leagues, Kyler was the one and only quarterback that we drafted. So, yeah, we pushed our chips in on that. And the thing that's very, very encouraging about Kyler, it's like we knew there was going to be some bumps, right? Rookie quarterback, rookie head coach, implementing a new system, bad offensive line, that we knew that there was going to be bumps. But things that are, this offense isn't stuck. It's evolving. We now see Kyler, I believe it was like by week 3, he started taking off. He felt a little more comfortable, both scrambles and design runs. We saw a hint of it in week 1. Then it went away for 3 or 4 weeks. They finally started taking deep shots down the field last week against the Bengals and then, of course, against the Falcons. So now we're mixing in rushing and deep shots down the field, and he's throwing just some gorgeous passes. I mean, that pass he had early in the first quarter against the Falcons where he scrambled and then hit Fitz coming back to him on the run. I mean, how many quarterbacks can make that throw? So with all of these things coming together, we're going to get Christian Kirk back in the offense. Really nice schedule coming up as well. They get the Bucks, they get the Browns, they get the Giants. I mean, Kyler, he's going to have some bumps along the way, but I mean, it's rocket ship emojis for Kyler Murray.
Love that. Yeah, no, I mean, Kyler, the story with Kyler coming out, obviously Heisman campaign, all that aside, is just how athletic he was on the ground, of course, but the touch that he put on the ball, just how pretty he was throwing deep, his accuracy. It was completely different from like a Lamar Jackson, who was certainly coming to his own as well. But yeah, man, it's definitely rocket ships up for Kyler Murray. Nate, Kyler is a player that you and I spent way too much time about, so you got to be pretty stoked to see kind of what he's drawn up for the first couple weeks here.
Absolutely, and I think what's shocking to many, or at least to me, I did not expect Kyler Murray to have as many pass attempts as he does. This guy's averaging almost 40 pass attempts a game. So a player that had the rushing upside, that has the accuracy, the playmaking ability of Kyler Murray, he's now getting 40 attempts a game. That's number 5 overall at the quarterback position in 2019. I mean, that's mind-bending. Right, we talk about the Konami code, we talk about that rushing upside, but the fact that he's even throwing the ball as much as he has currently with the supporting cast that he has, Pete mentioned it, you're going to get you're going to get Christian Kirk back. Goddamn, Kirk Cousins out there would be terrible. You're going to get Christian Kirk back in this offense, a player that we've talked about being the potential wide receiver 1 going forward. Hakeem Butler is dead. Andy Isabella is getting an opportunity. Hopefully he gets a bigger role going forward. But yeah, you've got to be happy about it. This is a guy that's number 3 overall in deep ball completion percentage. His upside is so immense. I took him in the first round of a rookie dynasty draft. I never take quarterbacks in the first round. It's an absolute sin. I shouldn't have done it. But Kyler Murray he's just a player I wanted to own because that upside is just so incredible, and we're seeing it now. Like Pete said, things are starting to evolve in this offense, and it's only going to get better as he gets a little more experience under his belt.
One of the next subjects I kind of want to handpick out of here as we look to wrap things up in the next few minutes or so. Tyler Boyd had the breakout last year, a player that, again, Sean Siegel was super high again coming into this year, and a player that was going high for obvious reasons. A lot of different, variables and ups and downs have happened in that Bengals offense, whether it's just Andy Dalton's play or that offensive line, whatever the case may be. But over the past couple of weeks, Auden Tate has kind of come onto the scene. So, Pete, I'm just kind of interested in your take of this Bengals offense as a whole. I was a big Joe Mixon guy coming into the season, understood the Tyler Boyd love. Obviously, A.J. Green's been missing from the script. Is Tate someone that you're kind of rolling out there? You speak about these kind of every week kind of flex type roles, where assuming that changes when Green comes back, or maybe it doesn't. I mean, how do you feel about Tate going forward?
Yeah, I think Auden Tate is showing that he can step up and contribute in these situations, especially when Tyler Boyd is, pulling coverage. I don't watch film, but if I did, I would assume that he was seeing a lot of Marlon Humphrey.
I think that's the case, yeah.
Last game, and that freed things up for Auden Tate. But Auden Tate has made some great catches. He seems to have really good body control, and I think he'll be relevant as long as AJ Green's out. I mean, when AJ Green comes back, there's no way this offense can support 3 wide receivers on a week-to-week basis. But You can pick your spots with Auden Tate for sure. I mean, you guys would know more about his prospect profile, and if he has it in him to have a full breakout, I'm a little less confident he has that in him, but I think he can definitely capitalize on some good matchups and some more higher scoring games.
So we'll get Nate's take on it. I know, just kind of adding as far as the prospect side of things was concerned. He's a huge 6'4", 6'5", Florida State type pedigree. I know he was hampered with a toe injury that kind of dropped his draft stock, and it's kind of found him at the bottom of rosters up until this point. Given the opportunity, I'm with Pete though. He's had a couple pretty nice catches. Expecting things to change once Green comes back. Nate, any Tate thoughts now or going forward?
Boy, I'm not a huge fan of Tate. I get what you're saying about the size and the playmaking ability. Clearly, AJ Green is very close to coming back. I don't think it's going to be this week. They're kind of non-committal on whether he would or wouldn't. Tyler Boyd's broken out. An example of a player that sometimes we have to wait on the breakout. And Tyler Boyd had the talent. He's a guy in the breakout finder that ranks all time in the top 15, one of the best we've ever seen. Despite low athleticism, there are just other markers that contribute to this. But AJ Green coming back is going to level everything. And in terms of Joe Mixon, which his inability to run behind this awful offensive line. I mean, this is, if you go to Football Outsiders, you can check this out. This is an offensive line that's 32nd in the league in stuffed runs. They're ranked. So Joe Mixon's being hit at or behind the line of scrimmage more than any other running back in the entire league. I mean, they're beat up. They lose the rookie tackle that they draft. There's just injuries all over the place. You've got injuries at the wide receiver group. Auden Tate's fine for now. When AJ Green comes back, everything's going to change. Pete said it. There's not enough targets to go around to feed all these guys. John Ross is out for a while, but Ross gave us an exciting flash. I mean, he looked like the player that they drafted highly in the first round, and if he comes back healthy, suddenly you've got a 1-2 punch with him and Boyd, and I truly believe that AJ Green is a future trade asset for a Bengals team that is currently 0-6 and probably on the cusp of a rebuild and possibly looking at a quarterback in the upcoming draft if the pick is high enough.
Let's talk about one more receiver here, and then we'll get to a waiver wire based question, and then we'll let Pete carry on with his very rich and expensive evening here, boys. Terry McLaurin has been one of the more fun, kind of fantasy headliners, and I'll stick my hand up. Nate and I both, for that matter, kind of had this affinity towards a Paris Campbell. Quickly, things changed there with Andrew Luck's retirement. I don't want to say there was a blind spot to Terry McLaurin, who obviously had a super impressive athletic profile, but I'm not sure anybody, no matter how big of a McLaurin fan you were, saw this kind of debut for him. What was McLaurin, for whatever the reason, Pete, a player that you were on, whether in your regular season long leagues and your FFPC leagues, kind of contextualize what you've seen from him so far for us?
Yeah, I had no shares in Dynasty. I didn't draft him anywhere in redraft. I was fortunate enough to pounce on the waiver in week 1 after 2 weeks because I had learned from my mistakes with guys like Michael Thomas, guys like Odell Beckham, who I wasn't sold on as prospects, who were, floating around that week 1 waiver. And then I write it off because I'm like, oh, no, he's not a prospect that I generally like. It's a fluke. It's a flash in the pan. But I learned my lesson with Terry McLaurin. I went maybe like 120% over what I would generally go for him just to ensure I got him, because it's like, look, I think I'm wrong on this situation and I don't want to be wrong the rest of the season. So I luckily recuperated a couple of shares, and yeah, he's an animal, man. I mean, he had the one game against Xavier Howard where he was held to 3 for 51. And then in every single other game, he's had 60 plus yards or a touchdown. With Case Keenum as his quarterback and another rotating door of other guys guys coming in for cameos. So, I mean, he's so good. I think we have to completely readjust how we think about him going forward, at least relative to our pre-draft comps and stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, again, a player that checked all the boxes athletically, but I know for me personally, and I won't speak necessarily for Nate, but I know we were both so hard for Paris Campbell, man, that, things kind of played out the way they did. Nate, it's been a fun season for McLaurin. We talked about DJ Shark in other episodes as well, but if you want to add anything to this Terry McLaurin saga, now is your chance, man.
I do.
Go for
Listen, hot off the press. When you get like a typewriter, whatever what is that? What is that sound I'm thinking of? Is that Morse? What is that? Is that just like off the news wire? I don't know the sound. We don't do sound effects on here, so just envision it. Listen, Terry McLaurin in the Breakout Finder. I have the newest version. It has recently come back to me. It's in my hands. I received it last night. I am looking at Terry McLaurin in it, and let me tell you, some of the metrics that we've created over here at Breakout Finder help sort of put a spotlight to this. Terry McLaurin had a 98th percentile teammate score. So again, when we go back and look at players, oftentimes we cite their collegiate, raw counting stats, and we diminish the potential of a player because we go, oh, he didn't do anything, he didn't produce. But suddenly more and more people have recognized that who you play with is a major factor in sort of the outcome and the result of what took place in college. He's a 98th percentile teammate score. And then he also has an 89th percentile level of competition, meaning that he played one of the stiffest schedules and faced some of the toughest defenders in all of college football across his collegiate career. So is it a surprise that he's done what he's done? Well, he had third-round draft capital, so not really, but those in Washington that took him, it's an impressive draft pick. He has clearly exceeded expectations, but there are some factors sort of built into what he did back in college that do leave some breadcrumbs to the trail back to a player being as good as he has been.
I like it, man. Yeah, no, McLaurin, like Pete said, is someone that we got to completely kind of do a 180 on and completely, reshape our thoughts and opinions on him pre-draft to what he's doing now, because what he's doing now, the fantasy footballers actually tweeted out that he has the 4th most receiving yards through the first 5 games in an NFL career, trailing only Anquan Bolden, some guy named Randy Moss, and the aforementioned Stefon Diggs. So some pretty good company there. Last one for us, Pete, and then we'll let you plug what you got to plug, man, and get the hell out of here. I want to talk about Mark Walton on waivers this week, as well as Jamal Williams, who should have been a waiver wire claim, last week, and obviously doing what he did last night on Monday Night Football. That Green Bay backfield, though, is completely back to a 50-50 split between Jones and Williams. So if you want to speak on Walton, Pete, and then any kind of thoughts you might have about the Green Bay backfield, and then we will get you out of here.
Yeah, Walton, I think, is interesting, especially for teams like me that drafted 0 RB and are really struggling to fill in some RB2 and RB3 production. The thing that was, I fortunately added him in one of the leagues on Friday before that game with just the thesis, what happens if Miami comes out of this bye and they're like, we're obviously tanking, we might move Kenyon Drake, let's see what we have on the rest of this depth chart. And there were hints that Walton was maybe about to surpass Ballage as the 2 there. And then sure enough, he comes out, week 4, 8 touches for 34 yards, 25% of the snaps. Then he comes out 11 touches for 75 yards, 42% of the snaps. But the real juicy thing is he also had the 6 targets, which gives us the kind of assurance that if he did step into a full-time role, we also know he can catch passes, which is important for the fantasy value. So it's obviously still a really dicey situation. I mean, Kenyon Drake has more or less been the bell cow there, and you've barely been able to start him. So it's like, okay, even if Kenyon Drake goes down or gets traded, what realistically can Mark Walton do in that offense? But as far as chasing volume, and you guys can speak to if we're chasing talent here, I think he's an interesting ad and someone you should be stashing if possible.
What about on the Green Bay side of things, Pete? Williams, I would imagine, was off the waivers a week or 2 ago, so probably a little bit too late for those trying to kind of scoop him up now. That backfield's got to be one of the more frustrating ones in the NFL. Again, maybe I'm biased as an Aaron Jones truther myself, but I think far and away he is the superior talent. But the Packers are just hell bent on splitting this roll up here. Do you have any kind of insight into what the Packers are thinking? Is this a complete timeshare split backfield going forward? Are we going to just continue to ride it out with a talent like Aaron Jones and kind of just hope for the best eventually?
I think at this point we have enough data and enough sample size to know that Jamal Williams is not going away no matter how bad Aaron Jones people want him to have the full workload. I mean, Jamal Williams was literally coming off of like an absence where it seemed like he might legitimately not be coming back to waking life. And Aaron Jones had the game of a century, and they came back and just fed Jamal Williams. So
it's tilting.
So really, we know that this offense is going to kind of operate, honestly, like the Broncos split, right? Where when those guys are on the field, they're going to be used interchangeably. They're going to get carries. They're also going to catch passes. And then you're just kind of hoping that the guy you own finds himself in the red zone on the field when they're in that territory. So this is one of those things where it's going to be massively frustrating if you're an Aaron Jones owner, but if you're a Jamal Williams owner, I mean, this is gravy. And again, he has that upside. We saw once Aaron Jones fumbled, dropped that pass, and he came in and was getting the full tote. I mean, this is a handcuff plus situation where he's going to have standalone value and big upside if something happens to Jones.
Right on. Yeah, we last week, Nate, we had Rusty on here, and of course I was, waxing poetic. I was spilling my heart about all things Aaron Jones. I loved Aaron Jones. It's finally time. And then, like Pete said, all that for nothing. It doesn't matter. The Packers kind of have their evaluation of Jones. It would seem it really doesn't matter what he does or what kind of box scores he compiles. Nate, you were steadfast in your convictions that you weren't viewing Jones as someone that you had to as a must-have or whatever it might be, someone you're not chasing. So that looks pretty good, man. I mean, is there anything else you want to add, whether it's the Miami backfield, the Green Bay backfield, running backs in general, your preferred tie brand, whatever it might be?
Oh, boy, I prefer tie brand. I don't want to speak on that. I don't. Let's talk about Mark Walton first, and I'm just going to try to make all this quick. Look, Mark Walton, aside from some draft capital, does not look like the type of running back that you invest in heavily, despite the fact that the Miami Dolphins are a putrid run game, have a completely dysfunctional backfield. Mark Walton is undersized, low college dominator rating, low athleticism, not a true pass catcher coming out of college, drafted in the 4th round. The fact that he passed Ballage, I like Ballage's opportunities in a single season here. But what are you doing with Mark Walton? If he has any spike in playing time, if he garners any value, you got to sell him immediately. This isn't a sustainable outcome. This is a team that looks likely to add a running back in the future in an upcoming class that is filled with studs, which takes me to Green Bay. I was a fan of Aaron Jones' talent, but I knew that his leash was short and the opportunity was going to stop this year. Regardless of whether Jamal Williams got his opportunity or not, we were going to see an end to Aaron Jones because the type of players like him with that draft capital, with that background, they just don't last long and they get replaced pretty easily. We talked about it. He was fortunate that Green Bay didn't add anybody. A lot of people speculated that Darrell Henderson might go there. Had he gone there, this would be a completely different conversation. But suddenly, look, we're in week 6. Here's Jamal Williams. This is worst case scenario. This validates the fact that the Green Bay Packers will, in fact, probably invest in something next year just to shake up this backfield. But can we talk about Aaron Rodgers in this group for a second? What, outside the top 18 in pass yards, outside the top 17 in attempts, outside the top 25 in touchdowns, squeezed right between Derek Carr and Joe Flacco with 6? Are you kidding me? What is he even doing out there? This Green Bay team, I know they're 5-1, but my God. In terms of fantasy opportunity, this is ugly right now. Very, very ugly. I'm hands off. If Aaron Jones gets another opportunity to shine similar to Mark Walton, I'm selling. I'm selling all these guys. And redraft, write them out. Do whatever you want. Be aware of a time split, potentially more so in Green Bay. But if it's dynasty, let them percolate. Let it rise a little bit. Let that value build. And then sell those son of a bitches because they're not going to be worth anything next year at all. Nothing.
Pete, you wanna come in over the top, man, and add anything you want to add about Aaron Rodgers, or just scream into the mic for 45 seconds if you want?
Well, sure. I'll do a little callback. I got a little succinct cherry to put on top of this. How about this? Aaron Rodgers is a Devontae Adams quarterback, and Devontae Adams is broken right now.
Well done. Well said, Pete. Man, listen, you came on the show, brother. You classed up the joint. It's not very often that Nate and I roll out with the suits and the ties and the fucking fancy wine glasses and some of our fanciest stuff from the cellar. So, Pete, from the bottom of our hearts, man, thank you so much. Tell the good people where they can find you, what you do, and anything else you wanna plug. The mic is yours.
Yeah, I'll be at the Lakewood Country Club. I'm going to play 9 holes, and then the fellas and I are going to get a little snooker tournament going. Might play a little 7-card stud after. We normally bust out the Cuban cigars. So, yeah, just check me out at the Country Club. You probably won't be let in, but you can just know that I will be in there playing for unfathomably large amounts of money. That's all I have to plug.
That's beautiful. I mean, there's really nothing else to plug. Nate, your turn, man. Do what you got to do, and then get us out of here. Please get us out of here.
I DM'd Pete a couple weeks back, man. Just giving him credit where credit's due, man. This guy is a super hard worker, one of the funniest dudes in the industry. I mean, there are enough dry, boring, run-of-the-mill analysts out there, and Pete is doing things that far exceed what anybody else is even attempting out there. He's constantly dropping the funniest videos. They're fantasy relevant. The guy's hyper creative. The video work is I got to pick your brain after this. I got to know how you're doing these things. They're impressive. I'm like low level, low tech compared to what you're pulling off over there, man. But dude, you're one of my favorite creators in the Twitter sphere, and dude, just a damn good fantasy football analyst, man. So I appreciate you coming on tonight. And if you have nothing else to plug, this is gonna be it, man. It's the end of the show right here.
Yeah, no, I was a little concerned you were going to say you're low T, but it's just low tech, so we're good.
Yeah, no, it's low tech. I was fired up on that Aaron Rodgers thing. My T spiked.
Yeah, that was real high T right there.
Yeah. I gotta go find my wife now. Yeah, so, well, it's a good episode. I appreciate you coming on, man, and check out the Patreon account. We got the Dynasty Buy Lows. I think Ryan is going to start doing a Devy-centric article, so for all you guys holding on to those 2020 draft picks,
let's talk about it.
Feverishly sweating at night, praying that this Green Bay run game continues to falter, praying that this Dolphins run game continues to falter, and maybe a juicy player will land somewhere over there and bring you fantasy gold. Check out Ryan's work. It's coming up, maybe even next week. So thanks again, Pete, for coming on. Check him out on Twitter at Peter Overzet. And, dude, you are a legend. You're the man.
It was a pleasure,
Cheers,
guys.
brother.
This is fun. Cheers.
Thanks, man.